Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to take a look at Ecolab's remote service strategy. We're going to do that with Dave, otherwise known as Cobb Mencarini, who is the program manager for remote service at Ecolab. Cobb, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, before we get into this remote service conversation, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, your role, the Ecolab business, your background, anything you would like to share.
Okay, I came into Ecolab after a 26-year career in the U.S. Navy in submarines. And I think a lot of that gave me some really uh, keys to being successful in my current role around program management and working with people in high stress environments. When I came to Ecolab, I had just retired in 2019, and I quickly worked my way through several roles over a short period of time to where I am now as a program manager for the global remote assist program and also our tied in installation and repair program. Uh, and so that's where I sit today.
Excellent. We just did a podcast a few weeks ago with a woman named Hallie, who is with Henry Schein. And that podcast was all about how her military experience has shaped her leadership style. And then also, we talked a lot about the opportunity to recruit in from the military. She was a combat pilot in the Army. So it was really cool to talk to her, and equally cool to talk to you. I am claustrophobic, so the idea of a submarine is just absolutely terrifying. So, hats off to you for your bravery and your service.
Thank you.
Okay, so you had a long career there, and then broke into the service world via Ecolab. So you and I chatted a bit while we were planning this, and I said the idea of the potential that exists with remote service and just how it can really shift the way service is delivered and kind of has a trickle down effect then into all sorts of things is just it's an area that I find very exciting, and so I want to talk a little bit about what you're up to and what you're doing now, but also what you think might be possible in the future. But let's just start with, what are your views on how you see remote capabilities as a way to better enable field teams to positively impact customer experience? What excites you about leading this program at Ecolab?
It's a good lead in. Really, what I had seen with remote service or the remote service provider industry is a lot of what they're advertising is having a technician in the chair or an expert in the chair providing support to the field teams,
Hmm.
right? And that's it's a good use case. But what we kind of had a vision on was what if we deliver it to the customer so that we don't have to send somebody from the field to the customer location, right? And we
Hmm.
can we can increase the customer satisfaction, decrease downtime for the equipment that they're using, give them some more interaction, first call resolutions, and allow our field teams to be more impactful and efficient with the things that they need to be at, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's proven to be, I think the way to go. And then if we can't resolve it with the customers, then we're taking that call information and then we're dispatching it with more information, pictures, details, some advanced troubleshooting. So then when our field technicians get there, they possibly have a better idea of what parts they needed to bring. Uh,
Hmm.
it narrows the focus of troubleshooting. So not everybody is a skillful uh, at repair and diagnosing the cause or the component level issue. And so then we're kind of giving them that extra lead in so they can be more successful. And we find if someone goes to a customer location and you're able to fix it that first time, right, towards that
Hmm.
first visit resolution, it's not only positive for the customer and the relationship with the customer and Ecolab, but for that technician, it's also a confidence booster, and it gives them
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of I did something and I positive and I completed a task versus I have to come back another day or I have to bring somebody with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. So, what you just said made me think of just sort of a little aside that I want to say. So we're talking today, obviously, about what Ecolab is doing, and we're going to dive more into that. But your point just made me think it's important to kind of say when I say that I find this area of remote service exciting, I think one of the reasons I feel it has so much potential is because the capabilities are significant and it's not a one size fits all type situation. To your point, you had seen a lot of examples of companies taking this technology and then using it to have someone very skilled sit in the back office and support field teams that are out and about. And for some organizations, that is the most powerful use case, and when you think about the talent landscape, et cetera, it becomes easy to see how that could be beneficial. You said, okay, that's interesting, but what if we did the same thing, but instead of having technicians on the other end, it's our customers? And how much could we, alleviate the need to go on site, or how much better prepared can we be, to when we get there, right? And that makes me think of a conversation I had a while back with Stephen Goldburn from Mettler Toledo talking about his point is like, we're not really going to do a lot of remote resolution, but these capabilities are incredibly valuable in like literally transforming our effectiveness by just knowing what we're getting into. Instead of going there just to assess what's going on and then having to go back more often than not to actually, do the repair, you eliminate that, whole diagnosis by being able to just assess remotely. And, there's plenty of other scenarios to imagine from
Mhm.
there, right? So, it's something where I just want to encourage people, even as they're listening to your story, to think it isn't about like, let's do what Ecolab's doing. It's about let's understand what these capabilities are, how far they've come, how vast the application for them is, and let's figure out where this type of modernization fits within our business, right? So when you think about, what really becomes possible leveraging these technologies further, like how do you see that evolving over time?
So that's a great question. I've had a lot of thought about this and the vision downstream. And what I see is several things, several capabilities based on technology advancements and the use of AI. If you've got, and I'm not trying to release any of our secret sauce right now, but if you've got a equipment that is connected and can do diagnostics or provide a health report. You could see your virtual, your remote technician in the chair, being able to, if they get a customer call, which I think is the reactive side of things,
Hmm.
um, or proactively, where you can log into a dashboard and see alerts and failures. And then it gives you the ability to, okay, let's say the example would be the customer calls and says, I'm having this issue with my equipment. We can all log into that account that is connected. We can look at, is there a hard component failure? If there is, then we can dispatch it not only to the field but to the right person in the field. Right? Maybe there's a specialist or a specialty there. And if everything is green and there's no component failures, then we can then back it up and say, okay, your machine is actually operating correctly. So let's look at your day to days and your preventative maintenance and see if there's something that your staff is maybe not doing or doing improperly, and I can
Hmm.
train you on it
Hmm.
right now, and then you don't have that problem again. So you're doing, I think you're doing several things here where you're giving the customer that immediate attention, and it's not you're just pumping. All right, I'll send somebody. You're actually engaging the customer, and they're feeling valued at that point because now you have somebody looking at their account, looking at what they have going on within their location. You're looking to resolve it with them. They're part of the solution. And then they know that if you have to send somebody, then you are actually, taking pictures and you're getting that speed there. So, um, it does many things, but technology wise, uh, I kind of coined our team, our remote assist team, as the hub, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll explain that is we're creating technology every day to make it easier for our customers. Applications, I can log into my equipment and see what's going on, or we can give them notifications that, hey, you need to take these actions to resolve your issue. But at the end of the day, people are going to be people, and technology sometimes provides it, as much of it as a bridge, sometimes it can be a choke point.
Mm-hmm.
And so our remote assist team becomes the human element at the end of the technology line for our customers every day. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's apps that we deliver to the customer needs app support. They can call us, right? And we provide that tier one app support. If
Mm-hmm.
they are told to do something and they don't understand how to do it, they can call us and we can walk them through it. So
Mm-hmm.
in reality, with our current version, we're not really fixing anything because we don't have parts on hand. We
Mm-hmm.
can't work with the customer with parts, but we can fix customer training issues, that things that
Mm-hmm.
they should be doing day to day. And really, it feeds itself where if I teach them something today, they're not making that same mistake tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it lessens the load, and then so they're more capable, and then they're able to interact with the technology we provide them, and they become more capable there, and that downstream has an effect on our field teams, or they can be more efficient. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I do want to come back to the efficiency piece, right? So, this is improving efficiency is sort of often the entry point for companies into, well, we should use this type of technology because it's going to help us improve efficiency. And I think there's really good reason for that thinking. It absolutely can. There's also a lot more you can do with it, beyond that, right? But from the perspective of looking specifically at how introducing these remote capabilities have helped from an efficiency standpoint, what have you seen in that area?
yeah. So I mean, efficiency wise, obviously, if we're resolving issues over the phone and avoiding dispatch, you're essentially freeing up the labor force, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
an impact there, right? So our average call time, because we've got the spectrum of I don't want to do anything, I just want my field dispatch, versus hey, let's try to get this resolved. So our average handle time is about 6 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of look at call center metrics, but we don't limit by call center metrics because our goal is to resolve the issue, right? So let's say in a 10-minute call we resolve a customer issue, versus the field, if we were to dispatch it, well, they have to get it, they have to plan it in their day, they have to drive there, then they have to walk on site, try to figure out what the problem is, and then drive to the next call. And they may be, based on priority or precedence, they may miss something that they had to do that day, and they have to patch it into the next day. And now again, the schedule is impacted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a decrease in customer downtime if we can resolve it. If we can't resolve it and we dispatch it, well, now we've hopefully been able to do some troubleshooting, take
Mm-hmm.
pictures, narrow the scope of focus. The parts shotgunning that happens unfortunately with field teams, so they just throw some parts at it because they couldn't figure it out. We have a reduction in part spend as a result. And really, the big winning metric that I think is the first visit resolution, or what I call first time fix rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honestly, our company really hadn't tracked that before this, and now it's a buzz. And when I went to the field service event this year, I saw how much first visit resolution was a big factor, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen a 20% increase on dispatches via if our team sends it to our field team versus the traditional method, they're getting a more than 20% increase in success rate on that first visit. And that's across the board. We've seen 20%. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you're saving that time. The customer satisfaction, which we really can't measure, right, goes up. But there's an interesting study out there by the Aberdeen group, and I'm sure there's other ones, but that's the one I like to reference, where 70% first visit resolution is sort of that marker, right? If your first visit resolution is below 70%, customer retention drops 10%. If
Mm-hmm.
it's 70% or higher, customer retention increases 10%. And they've got those service industry standard points where 65% is lagging, 80% is average, 88% is elite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're striving to hit that elite status, and in some of our areas we actually are exceeding it.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that as time goes on, we'll start to see that retention increase because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really good. So, there's certainly there's definite benefit. I think what's interesting, what I want to talk about next is, to get to the point where you can see that benefit, right? You need to get everyone bought into this idea of, hey, like, let's do this differently, right?
Yeah.
And as you mentioned for Ecolab, that wasn't even just an internal thing, right? It wasn't like, okay, we're going to introduce this technology and now these two functions within the business are going to interface differently, right? You're also extending that to the customer base. So I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about like how was it initially received? How did you work through any challenges? How have you sort of promoted adoption? What has that journey looked like to, essentially get you to the point where you've been able to recognize
Mhm.
those benefits?
Yeah. So really, it's a huge behavior change, and I'll even say it's a behavior challenge, right? Because we've got internally, we've got people that have been in the business for 20 plus years, and we've got some, all different ages. So certain technologies or certain process changes, there's different effects, right? Um, and internally, it's been, I'd say, a little bit of an uphill climb, as people are very resistant to change, especially when things work. It feels like every time we have a new app that comes out or a new feature that comes out, not just with my program but across the board, there's hesitancy and resistance. That the "who moved my cheese" mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we have saturated communication to all our field teams, and there's still some cases where it's fallen on deaf ears. So it's just continually stroking the pen and pushing the envelope and communicating out and looking for gaps that we can address and addressing it even down to the representative level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of we have to have partnered messaging from our leadership, right? They've
Mm-hmm.
got to be the driving force. They've got to own it. They've got to be part of the solution. Um, Externally with our customer base, we had initially prepared a huge frequently asked question sheet. Do I still have my rep? Do I have to pay for this? Do I have to call somebody afterwards? And we had gone through it, and really, customers, the best way I can describe it is when they call in, they're just floating down the river on the raft.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't think troubleshooting over the phone or through a video chat is something that they're not used to. And really, if you think about it, I try to put my customer hat on every day when I'm running this program. And what would I like? What would I want to see? And if you're going to call your Wi-Fi provider, that they're gonna tell you, let's turn off your modem and turn it back on
Mm-hmm.
again. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen. And most of the people that are willing to troubleshoot with us, they just do it. And then when they see the video capability that we have, that wow, this is pretty cool. This was fast. I appreciate it. We also see that some are hesitant. I just want my rep. And then if they don't get their service needs met in their timeline, a good 15% of them call us back that same day and say, "Hey, let's try this troubleshooting thing."
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think as we have them interact with us and they see that it's a possibility or a capability, even if we didn't resolve their issue that day, in their head they go, "Hey, if I've got some other issues, I might be able to use this as a path to success and,
Mm-hmm.
and get me back running." We do post call surveys with customers, And we see that, out of a 5-star rating, we're averaging about 4.6 stars. And it's really just simple. Did we resolve your issue? Yes or no? Was this helpful? Would you do it again? And really, resolving the issue, it's about 50-50 on the response, but 4.6 overall out of 5,
Mm-hmm.
if we fix it or not, is a great metric to look at from the
Mm-hmm.
customer side.
Right. For sure. So, I want to ask two things. You mentioned about the need to really stay on the communication internally.
Mhm.
What, like, we don't need to get into, a bunch of examples, but like overall, what is the gist of the message that you're trying to send in that
Um,
communication?
I think the biggest thing is I've kind of come at it from a couple different angles. Is we're the first line of defense
Mm-hmm.
for the field. We are essentially if the field is the franchise player, we're the role players that are being positioned around them,
Mm-hmm.
right? They need someone to pass them the ball or hand it off to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're doing, is giving them the handoff with more information. And then I've had some conversations with some of the field team members, the more senior people, and some of them have said to me flat out, "Your team can't do what I can do," and I easily say, no, you're right, we can't. We're sitting in a chair, we're on a video call, we can only listen to audible indications, and we can look at visual indications. But you know what? There's some things that we can do that you just shouldn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that's what kind of hits home with them,
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, I shouldn't have to go in to do this menial task that the customer should be doing already every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, I remember talking about the structure of Ecolab and how that is a distinction in your use of this versus some organizations. So, can you just talk a little bit about that, like the integration between sales and service, or commercial and service, and what that means when you think about going down this remote service path versus some of the challenges others might have?
Yeah. So, you know, Ecolab's made of many different divisions serving many different markets, healthcare, food and beverage, water, industrial plants. So there's a lot of differences even across the spectrum of Ecolab. And I'm representing the remote assist platform for the entire company, and I have my sphere of influence on one division, and I'm slowly bringing it to other divisions, and they're using it. But we do a lot of use case building. Um, you know, Fortunately for where I am, we are doing the expert in the chair with our field team support. We are doing an expert in the chair with a customer, and we also deployed it to our field trainers, because they can't be everywhere at once, and sometimes they have multiple new hires that they're working with. And
Mm-hmm.
so we deployed it with them. So if they're out in the field with one person and somebody else contacts them, they can assist them in a 15-20 minute call and then go back to their day. So that's what we used here. But we've got other divisions where they're not customer facing,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they have limited capability going into clean rooms, and they can't get that technician support. So we're looking at how do we leverage it, and where, and what makes the most sense. We're also looking at entry points for customers. It's not just a phone call. We could also do chat,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you can still get the links for that. So um, it's really looking at what is your use case, and then being creative to figure out, hey, how can I provide some type of value or relief to the
Mm-hmm.
team that's actually on the ground doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I see, even through the platform we use right now with Help Lightning, they're looking at spatial recognition. They're looking at AI provisioning there. I mean, one of the big things I'm trying to get them to do is dual language closed captions, right? So if you have a
Mm-hmm.
Spanish speaking person on one side and an English only speaking person on the other side, the system would do translations, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
almost there. They can do half of it, not back and forth. right?
Mm-hmm.
Identifying even GPS locations tied to assets within Help Lightning to help you get to, if there's multiple pieces of equipment on site, how do you get there? Where is
Mm-hmm.
it? So I think from that perspective, um, you know, if there's hesitancy, it's something you need to just try to be creative with
Mm-hmm.
and take some risk and effort. The even another piece there is even from a sales perspective, you're asking about sales. Um, what if you have a new customer or a prospective customer and you want to go in and maybe you can't be on site, but you need to do a site walkthrough, or maybe someone is there and you need a secondary person to look at certain things. So you can use that remote assist for that.
Mm-hmm.
Even doing inspections on existing locations, maybe even internally, not even customer facing. Um, Validating that hey, are we holding the standards? So there's a lot of things you can do with that um, that I think can lead you to building more efficiencies or gets you a
Yeah.
glimpse in the location without actually having to be there. So there's
Yeah.
cost savings there across the board.
Yeah, and it's interesting, any company that I've interviewed about this technology, it's like as soon as they bring it into the organization to use in one use case, it's like immediately it's like, oh, we could do this, we could do
Mm-hmm.
this, we could do this. So, um, yeah, it's really interesting. What I was thinking about though too, Cobb, is we had talked about so where this is increasing efficiency or taking those menial tasks away from the field team, that is being put back into their commercial activities. Is that accurate? Because they do both.
Yes,
Yeah.
right now we've got the majority of our field teams are dual purpose sales and service.
Okay.
I think this is giving us a glimpse of how we can have more dedicated sales team and a more concentrated, less staffed service team, and
Mm-hmm.
still get the same amount of resolutions done, right?
Yeah.
But it's you know placing. I always like to say, like the right problem to the right associate for the right fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the escalation is based on the need and not just for the heck of it,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah. And I think, that point is interesting as well, which is, you know, this technology has an ability to really and as well as AI, not just one, but all of it. It has an opportunity to really significantly evolve how service is being delivered, right? And a lot of times, if organizations open themselves up to, thinking beyond the current box, right?
mhm,
There can be like, you can reimagine the way roles are defined or split out, right? And you can really start to think about, okay, interesting, if we can do this, maybe this type of structure or this type of model would work better. And there's so many shapes that conversation can take. I mean, I've talked to companies that are looking at that specifically around with what we can do differently, we can improve diversity. We can bring people in that don't have this type of experience, that instead
mhm,
have this type of skills, And so it's really quite interesting if you let yourself get a bit creative, and, really not be tied to, well, this is what the structure has been, this is how we do things, right? If you really let yourself kind of think about, okay, interesting, like we could take this and then it could be a lever for us to affect some of these different challenges, how we bring talent into the company, how
mhm,
we, offer different career paths, whatever those things
yeah,
are.
yeah. And it's interesting that you say that because a lot of our senior leadership and really people from the field both when we are introducing this, um, a common question is, well, who are you staffing this remote team with, right? Are you taking people from the field and with that experience? And I've tested both, right? So in essence, it's no, we're not. We're taking people externally, and for the majority, right? I'd say 90% of the people are external, and we're bringing in people that maybe didn't know anything about the company, but they've got some IT background or customer service background. But the common denominator is they're technically savvy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're teaching them the equipment and we're teaching them, a good amount of troubleshooting. We've gotten down to some electrical component diagnostics and repair, right? But then we're scoped to a certain level of over the phone or over video call troubleshooting, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have a customer get into some situation where they need to put on safety equipment or
Mm-hmm.
PPE, right? Outside of the normal day to day, if they're dealing with a chemical for their equipment, we're going to ask they put on nitrile gloves. We'd ask they'd have to do that normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to have them open up a control box where there's electrical circuitry operating. So the scope is not as detailed as what you would need a trained field technician for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because and my fear with that is that if a trained field technician is doing remote assist and they know, oh, I could just turn this tap this resistor or this contactor, and I'll have the customer do it. Now they're breaking that safety scoping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want them to go beyond a certain level. Um, and then I also don't want them to, maybe be a little bit more, if they see like what's going on in the customer account, I don't want them to criticize the actual representative that's taking care of that account, right? Because the customer
Mm-hmm.
will see that thing, right? So by bringing in external people, it's a little bit of a less nuanced view. They're directly focused on what we train them to be focused on and nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we kind of control that interaction a little bit easier. And they're very capable. And we've piloted external people versus internal people. And to be honest, our external hires actually have a better success rate than the internal hires.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really explain why, right? And maybe it's to what I just talked about formally with we're training them to a certain level
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking at those things and otherwise they're handing it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, we have people that are remote, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
we have a centralized team, and even as we deploy it internationally, in Europe, we have a centralized team there as well, and they handle multiple countries. Here in the U.S., our team handles multiple, all the regions across the U.S. and Canada. But in Southeast Asia or in Latin America, it's more a couple of people for each country
Mm-hmm.
based on their volume and staffing. So it doesn't have to be, 15 people in the same building. They can
Right.
be in different time zones and different areas. The big focus we put on is that we make sure, since it's a customer facing associate and we want them to kind of make the customer feel comfortable and have that satisfaction built, we're looking for someone with the same regional dialect. We're looking for somebody with the same, so we're not going to have an American associate handle, a customer that's out of India, right?
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. We're not going to have somebody from Latin America handle somebody over in France, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's proven to be pretty successful in itself, but it definitely gives us a wide variety of who's in the chair because
Yeah.
the customer will never see them.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it opens up a lot of options. I
Yeah.
want to come back to what you said about the hub. And specifically what I want to talk about is, you were talking about where you are with this right now and how it's in use and the impact that it's had on Ecolab at this point. But in so many ways, I feel like we're just at the very beginning, not only with remote, but with AI, what can be automated, what should be automated, how will that continue to evolve, the way service is delivered and what customer interactions look like, et cetera. And so I just want to underscore the point you made about, we can introduce these different facets of interaction with customers, whether that's chat and or the remote assistance or whatnot. But the people ultimately are there when the customers need them. And I just, would love it if you could talk a little bit about that balance between we want to apply these tools, we want to automate what makes sense, but we also know that at the end of the day, our customers value that human interaction. And so it's important to have that as well.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sarah, and I think it really lends to you have to know your customer base, and you have to know, and even knowing them, you may find that the variety of customer preferences are a huge spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm a person that I hate calling and going through a voice automated system. I hate it. I would rather do a chat to a live agent all day, every day.
Literally
Um,
anything else.
right, right. There are people that don't mind it, then and you may be able to use those interactive automated voice response systems and resolve your issue and never have to talk to anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then if you put out an app, you have customers that they're going to use the heck out of that app every day. They're going to swear by it. And you've got customers that will never once log into it. They won't even create their account, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to provide a variety of options so that you can meet your customers where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to, as technology changes, it you have to get on board with it, but you can't leave your customers behind as well, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
some customers, either you're going to force customers to change and you might lose them.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to provide a full service capability to your customers, and that includes a mixture of technology, new apps, data, but then also you have to have people involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just being dynamic with the flow of society and technology.
Yeah. Do you see that ever changing?
Uh, I think it depends on who you ask and for what, but I don't think so. I
Mm-hmm.
think you're always going to have people that just want to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're always going to, I think you might see more of a 50-50 split,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to have some people that's all they want. I've got young adult kids, and they are, you know, everything they do is through some type of online feature. And if they have to call somebody,
Mm-hmm.
for, hey, I have to update my car insurance, and they're calling me and they're saying, what do I say? you know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it just depends on who it is,
Yeah.
really.
I think also, or I mean, I wonder if also, like, not just who, like, some people will want to deal with people,
Mhm.
but also certain situations,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's the other piece is, there's so much to consider to your point in preferences and how they will shift, but also, the nuance of, it isn't just about this person prefers this. It could be, this person prefers this until this happens, and then we better have someone that can, talk to them or be there in person or whatever that is. And, the same way you said you have started thinking about, okay, is there a point where it makes sense to separate out the service and the sales roles? It's important to continue thinking through these evolutions as all of those preferences and needs shift, right? So I I personally believe, like, I think human interaction is too important for it to go away. And not only based on preference, I think based on necessity. Like, I think humans are humans. And, like, that's another podcast. Um, but what those roles are and where that presence is important could definitely change, so that doesn't mean that, to your point, it could be 50-50. It could be something else, like where that human interaction needs to be applied could change and evolve. But I like the point you made about when the customer gets to a point where they need a person, we need to make sure that we have that person there, right? I think that's important to think about now and as the journey continues.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what advice do you have for folks that are on this journey, that are trying to figure out how does remote fit, and what do we do next, and how do we get people on board with it? What I guess lessons have you learned along the way that other people could benefit from hearing?
Um, well, I think the lessons I've learned, and this has probably been my biggest struggle, is some people see it and some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you need the supporting data, and a lot of companies haven't been positioned to capture the data you need to tell the story. So that's a challenge. I think it's going to be a challenge for most people,
What do you
most
mean by
companies.
that?
So showing the return on investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So us getting to our first time fix rate, it's what I like to call good enough for government work, good enough for Ecolab,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's only as good as the data that we have inputted, and we know
Mm-hmm.
it's a manual to the individual. What am I doing in my day? What did I do to resolve this type of input mechanism? And it's only as good as what they put in. So we get to it. I know there's a plus minus there. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how well. I'm hoping that one of the things that AI will help us leverage is the collection and turnaround of that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it could be as simple as even customer naming conventions being standardized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so it's a challenge. So if you're going to undertake an endeavor, and really not just remote assist, but anything with technology, you've got to show the ROI. You've got to be able to collect the data and how you leverage it to tell that story. And you can't just keep saying it the same way for all audiences because
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to resonate with all audiences. You've got to be very dynamic and agile and fluid around how you serve it up, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been really pushing this for the last 18 months, and my messaging has continually changed every couple of months, sometimes every week,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Depending on how I feel the audience is going. My best advice is you've got to start doing something to stay in line because everybody is,
Yeah.
right? We have competitors that are doing the same thing that we're doing. Um, their 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 bark is not as good as their bite, or
Mm-hmm.
their bark is better than their bite. So
Mm-hmm.
they're maybe not seeing the metrics on the back end, but they have a really good bow on it when they advertise
Mm-hmm.
it. Right? Um, it- but I mean, everything nowadays, even in your home, right? They've got smart homes. I mean, I've got my garage door opener on my cell phone. I've got my water sprinklers on my cell phone. I've got my fridge on my cell phone, my oven on my cell phone. So it really depends on what you provide the customers, what they can find useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've seen companies roll out technology, and as a customer, I go, yeah, this is really great for you guys. What is it for me?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't deliver the value to the customer, um, then you're really not doing anything for them. There's nothing to sell, right? So you've
Mm-hmm.
got to be creative in how does it make the customer's day easier, and how does it make your day easier or make you more money.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't do anything, you know, I mean, why did we switch from quarters and payphones? You
Mm-hmm.
have to continually change. Um, and that if you don't do that, you run the risk of falling behind and losing your company's structure and value.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I like the point about storytelling and to your point, really understanding what's important to the different audience you're speaking to, right? And how do
Mhm.
I need to change? It's not about the story has, the same main ingredients, right? But how you tell that story, it needs to be different depending on who you're speaking to. And, I know that you said that was the advice you shared at Palm Springs, right? Get on the train, don't wait,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
hesitate, don't, be too cautious because you're quickly falling behind. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that, a lot of individuals and companies struggle with. But, what we've talked through today, there's a lot of, you need to have a vision, right? And you need to be able to prove its value. But there's also a lot of learning as you go. Like you just said, my story has changed month
Hmm.
to month, week to week. And that's because you're doing it. So you're learning and you're refining,
Yeah.
and that's what it's about, right? It's not about throwing all caution to the wind and taking every risk or risking it all, but it's about getting going. Like you said, get started. And as you do that, you're going to learn so much that's going to steer your way,
Mhm.
along that journey. So I really like that.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you, Cobb. I appreciate you coming to share with us. I really enjoyed it. And we'll have to have you back at some
Yeah,
point to
absolutely.
let us know how you're getting on and what's come next.
Right. I really appreciate the opportunity and the conversation, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. You can learn more by visiting the home of Unscripted at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.